Greetings, dear friends. In this session, we will work with the slider block for the cart. We already have a ready block, so let's move on to this block. This is the bestseller block that we created for another page. And now we will add an additional trigger to this block so that it can be switched and display different content on different pages. First of all, let's load the control selector. Next, we will create a separate variable for this value here. I'll call it product type. Also, in the JSON block, we will register such an attribute. With the type string. Next, we will register the field control selector. Next, the title for this field will be select type, pass the value, now we don't have these attributes apparently, we didn't delete them earlier regarding option. The label will be bestseller. The key the second option will be cross-seller. Let's run the compiler. The compiler is working. Let's go to the site and pull this block into our cart. Let's go to the editor. Enter the cart, or rather the cart page. And here, after the call to action, we will pull out this block. It's called bestseller product. I'm pulling it out. It makes sense to change its name. First of all, an error. Let's see what we did wrong. So, the selector. And voiced the selector and wrote the selectors. But that's what the select researcher is called on the component. Also select control. Even though the compiler with C compiled it without giving an error. Let's check now. Refresh the page. And once again, add this block. Wonderful. Now, it is displayed working. Then we'll add to it title. I'll open it right away and close it so that it is multicolored. And here I'll choose cross-seller. Save. So the first thing I would do is probably rename this bestseller to product or game slider. If we rename the block now, nothing will happen. If I rename the ID, then we'll have to call this block on all pages. Invoke it anew and set it to fill with data. But if we just change the title, nothing will happen to it. Games. Slider. Best. Rosa. Speller. That's one way to name it. Let's see how this is displayed in the admin panel. All right, the next step will be to us. On the front, we need it. Let's go. Let's see why it shifts in the admin panel, what we can do here. So it doesn't shift. On swiper. Rapier. Display. We need to set flex, and then they will display well for us. Let's do this. So we'll go into CSS, find this class. Like this. Let's check. Let's save and check. In the admin panel, let's smoothly move to the cart, refresh it, and see that this block is displayed for us. The block is fully functional, but it generally displays products. With a filter, bestseller, that is, roughly speaking, products. But in WooCommerce, remember, there was a separate block that displayed cross-sell. It was inserted by default right here in the cart, but it didn't display anything for us because WooCommerce already has this option. There is a separate entry in the meta for cross-sell, and it adds there the products that, according to the condition, should be displayed. So the first thing we will do now, is start the cross-sell here. Let's move to PHP. Our block was called bestseller. Let's find it. Here it is, bestseller. Currently it pulls by the key total, but now we have a separate entry trigger in the attributes, so I will use this 3D by the key product type. And if 3D is enabled with the goal, then I will create. Let's first finish this, otherwise I'll copy this here, but rename the variable bestseller to slider. Games. And go further down. Everywhere we use bestseller, we will now use slider games. And it seems that's all. Now, we won't have this meta here. We will replace it with the include parameter. And in include, we need to pass an array with the IDs of these cross sales. Therefore, I will create a variable and name it cross sale IDs. And I need to create this variable and put all the product IDs into it. Now look at how it's set up in WooCommerce. It creates a separate meta entry and stores these IDs there. But the meta entry is linked to the product, meaning this product has its own meta and that product has its own meta. If I try to take the meta outside of this loop, but I can, for example, assign it a global cart ID, and it won't find anything because this is the page's territory, not the product's territory. So I need to first get the IDs from the cart in my block, then get them from these products, IDs, cross sells, and then store these IDs in a separate variable and pass them here to this slider. Well, let's try to do this carefully. And we do all of this right here inside, only for cross-sell. So let's sort out the cart. First, we will get everything that is in the cart. And if It's not empty. We will start the loop. Predefine this variable. We need to create an empty array. And here we will first get the post ID for the product. And then we will get its crossover and assistance. Get post. I specifically needed to get this ID, so I pass the product ID. Then I pass the key. The key starts with an underscore. Next, cross. Cell lead, and the third parameter is true to return a string. Wonderful. Now I have here IDs linked to the product, but we need to place them into this array. Therefore, we will check if it's not empty here. Then we add them to this array using array merge. Next, we can perform some actions. For example, if we loop through the products, it's possible that the same products will have other products as cross-sale, and I don't know how this function will display them if I pass the same ID 2-3 times in this array. But let's try to simply remove duplicates. We apply to our variable, we apply a filter. And remove duplicates. Let's see if something happens. Let's also display it on the screen. Let's check if we have IDs. If so, we have an empty array. No IDs. Let's go to the admin panel, edit the products. As we have add a few cross sales. We added 3 products. Refreshing the page. Now we are getting only 3 products. It probably makes sense, if they are not set, not to show this block, as it is done by default in cameras. Therefore, right here, we will make the following option if it's not empty. Then we will create otherwise an empty array. Right now we have 3 because we attached to this product several items. But if I delete it and refresh the page, there, no games found. But again, we need to redo the logic and simply not display it. That is, I would rather remove it from here, further here, where we have the check. I would move this inside, like this. And when we, as it were, don't have games that should be there according to the condition, it will simply be empty. That is, the block is there, but it's just empty. And if here, by the way, the layout shifted, this line should be removed in CSS. But I won't return to this point anymore. CSS. We decided in the last lesson that it will do. Let's edit this post. We'll add a few cross cells to it. We had 2 products like this. And when they are there, they will be displayed. Basically, this is the approach we use, and you can have a similar block, and for upsell, make all this data separate meta records. You can use the exact same approach, an additional trigger switch. Moreover, we also have, I believe, a similar slider on the single. It can also be combined with this slider to make a single block. In general, there's a lot that can be implemented. The approach is very clear. I hope it will be useful to you. This concludes the lesson. See you in the next lesson. Goodbye. And before we leave, let's check if the bestseller is working, since we haven't tested it. We had it on the store. So the bestseller is working. It's red because we are checking this variable, but it doesn't exist. You need to resave the block, or if we don't want to resave the block, we usually do a check. If it exists, this is how programming is done. If it exists, and then the second condition follows. And in this case, we won't have that red anymore. Yes, everything will work perfectly. Here, bestseller conditions are used, and by this bestseller key, it loads. While in the cart, it uses cross-sell. That's all for now. See you in the next lesson.